Friends, welcome back to the Field and Garden Podcast. We are at week number 4 of the Cool-Season Flower Chronicles. And this week, it's all about the choice, y'all. The choice is so significant. And what is the choice? Direct seed or start indoors? I find that most people think that's their personal preference. But y'all, it really has nothing to do with you. It's about what the seed prefers and what is the easiest way to get it to sprout. So let's have a listen to week 4 of the Cool-Season Flower Chronicles, which is Cool Flowers, Direct Seed or Start Indoors. Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining me here. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and welcome to the Cool-Season Flower Chronicles. I am the author of the book, Cool Flowers, which this 5-week series is based upon. And so this series is brought to you by thegardenersworkshop.com. And our goal is to help flower lovers at all levels to be able to grow and enjoy flowers and to even build businesses based on flowers, right? So this series is based on my book, Cool Flowers. In case you've never seen my book before, this is the cover. And I would love to autograph and sign a book for you. It, of course, is available at booksellers everywhere. But when you purchase the book from us, not only will I be happy to autograph it and personalize it to you, but we automatically send you the link to my free companion video series, which we call a virtual book study that goes along with the book. Now, if you already have a book, but you don't have access to the book study yet, we'd love to send that to you. So all of these links are going to appear right below this video. So if you just need the book study, there will be, there will be a link below where you can request that. So this is week 4, and this week we are talking about whether do you direct seed the seeds or do you transplant the seeds. So really what we're going to talk about, what I am talking about today, applies to all seeds. It's not just Cool Flowers. So this is kind of my basic drill down to the bare essentials so you can virtually figure out what to do with any seed that you have. So the choice, I want to first say that, oftentimes when I have been speaking with people or I hear people talk about planting, starting from seed, they often speak of that they decided to transplant or they decided to direct seed based on their own personal preference, whether that preference is because they aren't set up to start inside, so they thought they would just direct seed them, or it's some situation that is unique to them. Well, guess what, y'all? That's not the way it works. It's what the seeds need. It's not what the convenience for us is. And I will just be real honest with you. 99% of the seed problems that we hear about, we get tons of emails. I get lots of questions on social media. And when I was out traveling and speaking everywhere, I can almost promise you without a doubt, almost all the questions that I get are operator error. And they're errors in that they either did not read the seed packet that they had, and that's one of the things we try to provide on our seeds. That's kind of why we package seed, y'all. We don't save seed. We just buy extra seed from where we buy it for our farm and package it so we can put our custom instructions on there. It tells you on the seed packet how to start the seed, whether to cover it. When I am talking to people, they're like, the seed packet says how to plant it. Cool Flowers tells you how to plant it, but they did it the other way. And so I just want to throw it out there to start, before we even start talking. oftentimes you already have the correct information. And I understand there is so much information overload, but sometimes you just have to kind of put your blinders on and not and look to where the facts are. So if your seed packets came from us, you should be able to get the information that you need to start your seeds, how to start it, the steps to do that. If you don't, and you've got them somewhere else and that information is not there, Cool Flowers, for all the 30 flowers that are featured in here, each flower has a page. And on that page, I tell you how to start the seed. And so I just wanted to say that before we get started, that there's a lot of people struggling with seed starting. And I will tell you that when, I don't think I've told you guys this, way back when I started in the dinosaur age, right, about 20 years ago, actually 23 or 24 years ago, seed starting, I learned early on in my career that I was amongst the majority. I was a horrible seed starter. I mean, I tried every kind of kit. I thought I was doing all the right things, and then I finally found the right information, which is what's brought me to where I am today. But what I want to say is that if you have trouble with seed starting, you are amongst the majority of people. I mean, commercial growers, master gardeners, seasoned gardeners, heard it from all of them. Everybody typically struggles, but it doesn't have to be that way. Now there's more and more information to help you along, and hopefully that's what we're going to clear up here tonight. So what I want to just follow that up with is that once you figure out that you need to have good information to start with, and then you do it, and I just love this. Rhonda that works with us here, we just posted a blog about storing seeds, and she quoted a professor from one of the universities that said every seed has its own little lunchbox, excuse me, inside of the seed. It has everything it needs to sprout, just like a bulb does. You just have to give it the conditions that it needs to bring that out of it. So seeds can be really easy to start once you make the right choices, and that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. So first off, every seed in Cool Flowers tells you which method that I prefer. There's many seeds that can go either way, meaning they could be started indoors or they could be started outdoors. And I list in Cool Flowers, if both methods are listed on the page, if it says start indoors or start out in the garden, whichever one I list first is my preferred method, because sometimes that information is based on people that can provide unique environments. And so, yes, it is possible. I'm just going to think of one off the top of my head. Yes, it is possible to direct seed snapdragons. I have met a couple of people in the world that have direct seeded for years and have success. But I will tell you, the 99% of the rest of us do not have that perfect condition in the garden to be able to do that. So sometimes you have to take, when there's both offered, that with a little bit of a grain of salt. So what I have done is listed first the way that I do it. So there are choices, and it sometimes depends on what your actual setup is. So let's talk about transplanting first. So the number one issue that I hear from people is they can't quite figure out the timing of transplants and direct seeding, and that 6 to 8 week before your first fall frost or your last spring frost, depending on when you're planting it. That window is for both, either direct seeding or a transplant. Obviously, if you're going to be planting a transplant, you have to start it however many weeks before you need it, right? So it's really about a big countdown. So for me, I'll just give you a couple examples. So our typical or expected first fall frost is mid-November. So that means our 6 to 8 week window would be I have to always stop and think, y'all. So 8 weeks back, November to October to September. So mid-September to October 1st is kind of our 6 to 8 week window. So we now, through the past most recent years, are now tending to plant transplants, especially, not necessarily true with direct seeding, a little bit later. So I would never go to that 8 week. I'd always go to the 6 week, and sometimes I'm even doing it when it's a little bit even closer to my frost date. And why is that? Because our fall weather is lasting longer. We aren't going into cold. Used to be that Thanksgiving here, you're bundled up and cold. Well, that's not always the case now. So with transplants, you have a wider window of options because you're walking out with a plant that you started indoors and you're planting it out in the garden. So you have a little bit more options, meaning you can go a little later into winter planting. So when do I start those seeds? You really need to have, you need to kind of get the feel of your growing situation, meaning how long does it take you to grow a transplant? Now, obviously, some transplants grow slower than others. I'm thinking of a couple of cool flowers that are especially slow, which will be the first ones that we'll start this week, are Rubeckias. They are so much slower to grow than some of the others, so we always start them first. And so if it takes you 4 to 6 weeks to get a transplant, then I would say to you, I would start 6 weeks before that optimal planting date that you're shooting for. And so this is really all about sitting down with a calendar. That's one of the things that, I think people underestimate this so much. And I talk about this kind of in depth in flower farming school because my whole farm is run from a calendar. To sit down with your calendar, if you haven't already done so, and say, okay, you've got your frost dates. We talked about that in previous weeks. You found out your frost dates from reliable resources. You mark it. You count back 6 to 8 weeks. That's when you're going to plant. Then you count back however many numbers of weeks that you need to start seeds. That means you need to have the seeds on hand, right? So that means you need to even order earlier than that. So transplanting, because the seeds are started indoors and you have a controlled environment, you have a little bit more wiggle room. You don't have seeds, and we'll talk about this in a moment when we're talking about direct seeding. With direct seeding out in the garden, you can't wait but so long because the seeds need some heat to germinate. So you can't do this as much with them. That's why whenever I'm given the choice, I always start seeds indoors. We have more success. You have more control. It's less labor. It's less expensive. You don't waste nearly the volume of seeds. And you get a better stand of plants. And if you talk to commercial growers, they'll tell you that. It's just a less labor way to get a great stand of plants. So you need to start your transplants however many number of weeks it takes you to get your transplants grown to have them for that planting date. And just a couple of things that are different for me when I'm doing cool flowers. I like to have a little bit bigger transplant to go into the garden now than I would when I'm planting in spring. And the reason for that is that when you plant, a celosia or whatever, a ageratum or zinnias or basil or any of those things in spring, they're going to just take off and start growing right away. Well, that's not true with cool season hardy annuals. You're getting them in the ground and they might grow, you're hoping they only grow a little bit before winter. But they're going to do more root growing through the winter. So to have you don't want a big transplant, but you don't want to plant necessarily a 2 or 3 inch plant out there. It's nice to have, I like a 4 to 5 inch transplant that's really healthy to put in the ground so it has its very best options when you're going through the winter. Now, I find that using the biodegradable film that we use called Bio 360, and the link to this is also going to be below the video here. The real benefit, even if you don't use it in the summer, which we do use it, we use it year round, the big benefit of using the biodegradable film with Cool Flowers is that it's black on one side and white on the other. You make your beds with the black side up, and then that means that all winter, that soil, because that plant's not growing into a big canopy like summer stuff, right? It's going through the winter as this little teeny plant about this big, so that black is exposed. It does a couple of things. One, it helps to suppress those winter weeds. And then secondly, it warms the soil just a little bit. And when that happens, the roots grow more. I attribute our huge success with Cool Flowers to biodegradable film with the black side up, and then we hoop and row cover, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. When you have a hoop and row cover on top of that black film, I'm telling you, it is like a little Club Med underneath there, y'all. I mean, who wouldn't want to live under there? Sunny during the days, it concentrates the heat, they're protected from the wind, the rabbits, and the deer, most importantly. And the weeds just really can't get a hold. So we do depending on the winter, if we are dead cold, I mean, if it's 10, 15 degrees outside, I'm not doing this. But when we have those winters where, it's hanging in the 40s, and sometimes it'll go up a little bit for a period of time, sometimes I will push the row covers off and do a little hand weeding, because the chickweed and those winter weeds will grow. But that biodegradable film really suppresses a lot of that from happening and saves you a whole lot of labor. So a question that we've gotten from several people is, like, where can I start my seeds for Cool Flowers? So the seed starting magic temperature that I have learned for us, for starting indoors, is about a 65 to 70 degree room temperature with warm soil, meaning because they should be started on a seedling heat mat. And when you give them cool temperatures for the air with that warm soil, these cool season hardy annuals really sprout much, much better. Unlike, the warm season stuff want at 90 degrees, air temperature, soil, the whole 9 yards for the best sprouting. So to do that, this is just yet another one of the many reasons that I love soil blocking. Soil blocking is so space savvy that you can, let's just say you have a greenhouse. See, that's the people with greenhouses have the hardest time starting Cool Flowers at the proper time, because it's just too hot in the houses to be able to start them. But for those that do soil blocking, it is so easy to set up a little area anywhere in your home that's air conditioned, and to get your Cool Flowers started. Once they're sprouted and grown up a little bit, you can move them to some warm. It's getting them to sprout that they really need those cooler conditions than we're used to giving seeds in warm season stuff, right? So 65 to 70 degree air temperature, warm soil to get them to sprout. And as I mentioned earlier, whenever I'm given the choice, we always start indoors. And I will tell you that we're going to talk about direct seeding now. And fall is the only time I direct seed. I do not direct seed any warm season tender annuals, no sunflowers, no zinnias. It's just a matter of saved labor, saved seed, and a better stand of plants with less work is the bottom line. Because I do this as a business, and as a business, it's all about profit and trimming the things that are unnecessary, and having a good seed starting method and a system to follow makes all the difference in the world. However, there are several cool season Cool Flowers that really that do the best with you sowing them directly in the garden. And I'm not going to go through them because it's all in the book. But I just want to give you some tips. So again, You just have to provide for them what they want. Now let's just say the name, Cool-Season, gang. So you need to be sowing these seeds. People oftentimes get so excited about direct seeding and starting indoors for that fact. But when you direct seed outside really too early, I mean, you just get no seeds to sprout. It's just too hot. They like the perfect Indian summers. Cool nights and warm days, not hot days. 55-degree nights and 70-degree days is in a perfect world. That doesn't often happen that way, but that's what your goal should be. So planting them. So here where I am in southeastern Virginia, I mean, how many people have I talked to in August that have planted their cool flowers? It's like, you shouldn't even be thinking about doing that till October 1st. And no way, they might sprout, but they are not going to grow much further. But the problem is, it's temperature. A lot of sprouting, especially out in the garden, is all about temperatures, y'all. And there's nothing you can do to change that. There's not enough water in the world to fix a temperature issue in your garden. So direct seeding, you got to give them what they want. And here are some tips. This is the way I get such great stands of direct seeded stuff. And this is why I don't do it for anything else. You have to oversow. You have to overplant. So I can say this because I know for the first, oh goodness gracious, I bet it took me 10 years to become a great direct seeding success farmer. And it's because I was sowing too sparingly. I mean, I can remember larkspur comes to mind. I was sowing a seed, with my fingers every 2 inches. And I'm pretty good at doing that. I'm pretty quick, actually. And I still do it that way. But I don't put a seed every 2 inches. I sow much thicker. And here's the problem most people cannot overcome. And I will tell you that even very seasoned gardeners and even some seasoned farmers refuse to practice the next step that I'm going to tell you. And this is the secret. If you follow my instruction and oversow, then you have to thin, y'all. You have got to thin them. And no, you can't save the transplants and move them somewhere else. That's why you're direct seeding them. They just typically don't transplant very well. And then you risk injuring the seedlings you're going to leave there. It is just part of growing them. And so if it says a plant every 4 to 6 inches, then you need to pull out everything to those pretty much, that's not exact, but you need to give them room. Because I'll tell you what the problem is. They look really healthy when they're about this tall. I don't thin anything until very early spring. Okay, so you understand that. I don't do any thinning in the fall. We get them through the winter, make sure everybody's going to live before we thin. We thin in the very early spring and get them down to whatever most often it's 4 to 6 inches. But I'll tell you what I do not thin typically. Iceland poppies, Nigella. Both of them do really well kind of closer together, but you have got to thin. And if you go, there's a link, I think, underneath this video to the garden, the stand-up garden hoe. And we have a hand hoe also that I use both of them. I love using the hand hoe for thinning seedlings. So I will tell you, you may have to cry if you have to while you're doing your first thinning. But what happens if you don't thin, they go through the winter looking great. But once they start growing in spring, this happened to our Bells of Ireland, in fact, this last year. Because of COVID, they did not get thinned on time. It was totally my fault. So they were overcrowded. They got a little disease going a little earlier, and they were just wiry. And so you have to thin because there is not enough air, light, and nutrition when they're all packed together. When they're this tall, they look really beautiful, but that does not last long. So be strong and thin, gang. You have got to plant direct seed. When you direct seed, we plant to be able to prevent weeds. And in that, I mean, I almost always, whenever I'm talking about planting, I almost always plant 4 rows in a 30-inch bed, but that is not true when I'm direct seeding. When I direct seed, I only put 3 rows. That allows me to give enough room between the rows to run my garden hoe quickly and efficiently throughout the bed. And that garden hoe link is below this video, and there's a couple of videos on there showing me doing it. I can hoe a 100-foot bed in less than 15 minutes with no backache, y'all. And when you plant your rows too close together, you can't do that, and then you get winter weeds. So I plant to over hoe. I do that to prevent weeds. So you plant your seeds, and even before, and there's videos of me showing you how I recommend to direct seed for success. When you follow those steps that are in the book, and then start hoeing, so let's just say you direct seeded today. In about 10 days, you're going to run that garden hoe like you see in the videos the first time. You aren't going to see you might not even see any of your seeds sprouted yet. But let me just tell you, the weed seeds are already working. Their wheels are already spinning. So you run the hoe throughout your garden, not in the troughs that you've put your seeds in, and you're going to do that about every 10 to 14 days, and that's going to do a couple of things. That's going to really prevent any weed seeds from getting started. And secondly, it's going to exhaust the weed seed population on the surface. So what'll happen is after doing that about 3 or 4 times, so for me, I plant 1st of October. So mid-October, I do my first hoeing. Then about every 10 to 14 days, I do it. I end up doing it about 3 or 4 times before we get into dead winter, and then not much is growing. Then when something does grow, guess what, y'all? You don't mind pulling it, because there's only a weed here and a weed there. There aren't carpets of weeds because you have prevented them. Once you figure this out, direct seeding will rock your world. I direct seed bells, bachelor buttons, nigella, Iceland poppies, giant poppy pod poppies. I'm just thinking, did I say bachelor buttons? Dill. And so I direct seed all of those highly successfully with little to no weeds. And when you do this practice in the fall, if you're fall planting, then in the spring, there's virtually hardly any weeds because you've exhausted. So what are your people are asking about mulching options for the direct seeding? Now, if you have either a home garden or a small operation, then you can mulch. But we don't find it necessary. Doing our hoeing once, which we just spoke of, you kind of exhaust the seed population, so that's not really necessary. However, if you want to, wait until your direct seeded stuff gets at least 4 inches before, and you can use anything, and I just lay it in between the rows. I don't mulch necessarily right in between the seedlings in a run. I mulch the areas between the rows. So I just want to tell you that also, and there's videos, there's a link underneath here to our row cover kit, which is the row cover, the hoops, and the bags. I think it is beneficial for everybody, no matter which method you plant, to row cover. It protects your plants from wind damage, pest damage, animal damage, and it just keeps the foliage in better condition for cutting once it's time to cut. And secondly, it just keeps it a little warmer underneath there, and especially if you're in really cold conditions. You just can't believe what that lightweight row cover. This is not plastic. Air, water, and light, 85% go through this fabric. So this is not made for snow load. This is not, it only gives 4 degrees heat or cold protection, I guess is the right way to say it. But it's the wind protection, y'all, and then the concentration of the heat, especially when you use the black film, that changes everything. We do not sow seeds into the black film. We use open beds, hoe. We use the black film for transplants. Now, I just want to tell you guys what my favorite my little group that I'm highlighting this week that are some of my very, very favorites. And this is the umbel family. This is dill. This is false Queen Anne's lace. This is Ami Magus. This is all the flowers that the heads are about this big, but they're made up of a gazillion little teeny weeny flowers. And not only are they coveted by flower arrangers, bouquet makers, florists, everybody, they're coveted by others. And those would be pollinators, guys. So, especially little native bees and little teeny insects that are all beneficial to our gardens in some way, shape, or form. Little teeny insects have little teeny mouths. And little teeny mouths need little teeny flowers. And that's what this group provides. So not only are these gorgeous cut flowers, and the links to these are right below, but they are really beneficial to our garden in so many ways. I will tell you that we always overplant our dill patch. We use Dill Bouquet, and it gets like 5 or 6 feet tall. You can stand, so it's like almost eye level. You can stand and watch the insect activity, and I could stand there all day. Little native bees and little parasitic wasps, and just so much good stuff going on there. I mean, it's really nature in action. And so don't forget to include those in your cool flower lineup. The Dill Bouquet is one of our favorites. Suzanne, my sister, who's the bouquet maker, always used to say, and now people ask for it. They ask for the fireworks in their bouquet because she would put the dill just above the canopy of all the other flowers, and that's exactly what it looks like. So it is really, really special. And so, gang, I want you to remember one thing. There's only one true fail in cool flowers, and that's not planting them. And just take the plunge, and you learn so much. I mean, I had some epic fails through the years, and still, as I experiment and plant in the wrong places. So just remember, you have to plant to get started doing this. And the gardenersworkshop.com is bringing this series to you, and we just want to help flower lovers enjoy flowers at all levels, and even more so to build businesses based on flowers that we all love so very, very much. So check the links below the video. Until we meet, guess what? Next week is week 5, the grand finale. I'll do an overview and address questions that we're seeing. And until we meet again, gang, ciao. All right, folks. So hope that cleared up why so many people perhaps struggle with getting stuff to start, whether you're starting stuff indoors that should be direct seeded or vice versa. And making that choice should be based on information about the seed, not about what your personal preference is. And also, y'all, seed starting, when you kind of follow it from that perspective, becomes so easy. We have a ton of great information over on the gardenersworkshop.com. I actually have a little short on-demand course called Seed Starting Made Easy. If you're interested in soil blocking, which is the method that I have done for over 20 years, that is super space savvy, easy, doesn't use a lot of plastic products like trays and cell packs, those types of things, and just grows an amazingly healthy and quicker transplant. So I would encourage you to check that out at thegardenersworkshop.com. And friends, remember, it's not about you. It's all about the seed. And I hope you're going to join me for the next one, which is week 5, which is the grand finale of the Cool-Season Flower Chronicles. Ciao.